I've seen some entitled people in my day, but this HOA Karen actually had the balls to call the cops on me for not giving her free gas from my own pump. Picture this level of insanity. I'm minding my own business, filling up my truck when Brenda Ashworth, think every nightmare neighbor rolled into one person, comes marching across my driveway like she's conducting a military inspection. This woman looks me straight in the eye and says, "Fill up my Range Rover, Marcus. As HOA president, I shouldn't have to pay for gas when residents have fuel available." When I said absolutely not, she whips out her phone and calls 911 like I just committed murder. I need police assistance. This man is being hostile and threatening me. The smell of diesel mixed with pure desperation was thick in the air. Here's what made her 911 call the dumbest mistake of her entire life. She had absolutely no idea who she was really talking to. "Where are you watching from? You're going to love this. Let me introduce myself properly. The name's Marcus Kellerman, and I'm what you might call a guy who's seen some things. 52 years old, been through more career changes than most people have had jobs. Started in the military logistics division where I learned that preparation isn't just smart, it's survival. The metallic taste of MREs and diesel fumes became my daily routine for 20 years, moving supplies across 3 continents. That was before life threw me a curveball the size of a freight train. My wife Sarah battled cancer for 2 years. 2 long, expensive, soul-crushing years of treatments and hospital bills. When she passed last spring, I couldn't stay in our old house anymore. The creak of every floorboard held memories I wasn't ready to face. So I packed up, sold everything, and moved to Willowbrook Estates, a nice little subdivision where property was cheap and neighbors supposedly minded their own business. Or so I thought. Willowbrook's got about 200 homes, mostly decent folks who work honest jobs and want that suburban dream. Tree-lined streets, kids playing in yards, the whole Norman Rockwell fantasy. The HOA used to be run by a retired teacher named Mrs. Henderson, who kept things sensible. Mow your lawn, don't paint your house purple, pay your dues, simple stuff that actually made sense. Then came Hurricane Brenda. Brenda Ashworth moved here from some ritzy gated community where the average house costs more than a NASA rocket. Real estate agent drives a Range Rover that gleams like a diamond and has that particular brand of entitlement that comes from never hearing no in her entire privileged existence. Within 8 months, she'd somehow conned her way into the HOA presidency on a platform of elevating standards and removing undesirable elements. Translation: ethnic cleansing for suburbia. I started noticing her pattern real quick. Violation notices to the Rodriguez family for excessive vehicle parking. They had 2 cars. Fines for old Mr. Orion's vegetable garden being inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Harassment letters to the young black couple who dared to install a basketball hoop. Meanwhile, her white neighbors with identical setups. Radio silence. Now, about my fuel pump. When I bought my place, it came with a perfect garage and workshop space for restoring vintage trucks. The previous owner had been a farmer with proper agricultural permits for personal diesel storage. Completely legal, professionally installed, inspected annually by the fire marshal. The sweet smell of diesel mixed with motor oil became my therapy after losing Sarah. The pump setup is gorgeous. Professional grade. Equipment, safety features that exceed code requirements, clear private property signage. Cost me 15 grand to update. But during the last power outage, I was the only guy with reliable fuel for generators. Helped 3 elderly neighbors keep their medical equipment running. That's when Brenda targeted me. She came clicking over one morning in those ridiculous designer heels. You could hear her approaching like a tap-dancing spider. Started interrogating me about zoning compliance and community resources like she was conducting a federal investigation. When I showed her the permits and agricultural exemption, her face went sour as expired milk. "Well," she sniffed, "we'll just see about that." Within a week, I got my first violation notice, $500 fine for unauthorized commercial activity. The letter was longer than my military discharge papers and about as friendly as an IRS audit. Apparently, my fuel pump was creating unfair advantages and attracting undesirable traffic patterns. I spent 3 hours researching HOA covenants, printed documentation proving my pump was completely legal, and hand-delivered my response with a smile. Figured I'd educated her. Case closed. That's when I learned something important about entitled people. They don't want to be right, they want to win. And Brenda had apparently decided that this blue-collar veteran with his industrial equipment was going to be her first scalp in the battle for Willowbrook's improved image. The acrid smell of her cheap perfume lingering in my driveway should have been my first warning. This woman was about to make my life very interesting. 3 days after I delivered my legal documentation, Brenda called an emergency HOA board meeting. Emergency, like my fuel pump was about to explode and level half the county. The community center smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams, that distinctive mix of industrial car, pet cleaner, and decades of neighborhood drama. 30 confused neighbors sat in squeaky folding chairs under fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. The metallic taste of tension filled the air. Brenda had prepared a PowerPoint presentation about my fuel pump because apparently that's what passes for crisis management in suburbia these days. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, clicking her laser pointer like she was targeting enemy positions. "We have a serious safety hazard that requires immediate action." Up flashed a photo of my fuel pump with dramatic red arrows pointing at it like evidence from CSI. She'd even added scary captions in bold red text: explosion risk and environmental hazard. The woman had clearly missed her calling in disaster movie marketing. "This unauthorized commercial installation poses significant risks to our families, our children, and our property values," she declared with the drama of someone announcing the apocalypse. I raised my hand politely. "Ma'am, I provided documentation proving the floor recognizes only board members during formal presentations." She cut me off with a smile that could freeze hell itself. Here's where it got interesting. Brenda had actually done her homework, sort of. She'd researched fire codes and zoning ordinances, even pulled up some obscure county regulations about fuel storage. The problem was, she'd completely missed the agricultural exemptions that made my setup bulletproof legal. Back in my military days, we had a saying about officers who'd read half the manual and thought they knew everything. They were the most dangerous people on base because they had just enough knowledge to be confidently wrong. She spent 15 minutes describing disaster scenarios straight from bad action movies: explosions leveling city blocks, environmental contamination turning Willowbrook into Chernobyl, insurance companies fleeing in terror, property values crashing harder than the stock market in 1929. The crowd was eating it up like free cake at a church social. Neighbors who'd waved at me for months suddenly looked at me like I was cooking meth in my garage. The nervous shuffle of people shifting in cheap plastic chairs filled the room. Therefore, Brenda announced with prosecutorial satisfaction, I motioned for an immediate $1,000 fine and 48-hour removal deadline. All in favor? 4 hands shot up faster than rockets at Cape Canaveral. That's when I stood up. My chair screeched against linoleum like nails on a chalkboard, cutting through the silence. "Before you vote," I said in that calm tone 20 years of military service develops, "might I suggest reviewing actual facts instead of Hollywood fiction?" I walked forward carrying a manila folder thick as a phone book. The room temperature seemed to drop as Brenda realized I'd come prepared for war. "First," I said, pulling out official documents, "here's last month's Fire Marshal Safety Inspection Report, passed with flying colors." Marshal Henderson noted, "My installation exceeds current safety standards by a significant margin." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves in a disturbed pond. "Son, here's my agricultural exemption paperwork properly filed with the county and renewed annually for 3 years, completely legal under state and federal law." The murmurs grew louder as reality penetrated the manufactured panic. Third, confirmation from my insurance company, full coverage, complete liability protection. They actually reduced my premiums because of the advanced safety features. Then came the mini twist that changed everything. Oh, and Fire Marshal Henderson, he's sitting right there in the third row. Jim, why don't you tell folks about these safety hazards that have Brenda so concerned? Fire Marshal Jim Henderson stood up grinning. Gee, like he'd won the lottery. Folks, I've inspected hundreds of fuel installations in 30 years. Marcus's setup is textbook perfect. Hell, it's safer than most commercial gas stations if I'm being honest. The room exploded. Neighbors demanded explanations. Board members shuffled papers nervously. Someone actually started applauding. Brenda's face cycled through more colors than a mood ring having a seizure. Her desperation mixed with overpriced perfume created a nauseating cocktail. Well, she stammered, voice cracking. Safety isn't the only concern. Property values, aesthetics, traffic patterns. Actually interrupted Dorothy Martinez, sweet elderly neighbor from 2 streets over. During last winter's power outage, Marcus kept my husband Harold's oxygen machine running all night. His fuel pump literally saved Harold's life. That opened the floodgates. The single mom who got emergency fuel during the ice storm, the veteran with backup power for medical equipment, the family whose generator prevented basement flooding. Story after story of my dangerous installation, actually helping the community. Brenda called for immediate recess. The vote was postponed pending further investigation. As neighbors filed out, several apologized for believing the scare tactics, but I noticed Brenda hunched over her phone, typing with the fury of someone whose plan A just exploded in her face. The sharp clicking of her acrylic nails on the screen sounded like tiny hammers building something unpleasant. Round 1 was mine, but something told me Brenda Ashworth was just getting started. 2 weeks of blissful silence made me think maybe Brenda had finally gotten the message. Should have known better. You don't back down. A woman who considers designer handbags a constitutional right without serious retaliation. I was in my garage Tuesday morning, elbow deep in rebuilding a carburetor for my 73 degrees Celsius. Heavy. When unfamiliar voices drifted in from my driveway. The sweet smell of motor oil and metal shavings couldn't mask my sudden unease. Through the window, I spotted a guy in a polo shirt and clipboard talking into a radio. Official looking. The kind of official that makes your stomach drop even when you've done nothing wrong. City zoning inspector. I wiped my hands on a shop rag. The rough terry cloth felt like sandpaper against my oil-stained fingers and headed outside to face whatever fresh hell Brenda had unleashed. Mr. Kellerman. The inspector was maybe 30, earnest face. Probably went into government work thinking he'd save the world. I'm Dave Morrison from City Planning. We received a complaint about unauthorized commercial activity at this address. Commercial activity? I kept my voice level, though my brain was racing through Brenda's latest creative fiction. Anonymous tip claimed, "You're operating an unlicensed fuel station selling gasoline to residents." He glanced at his notes, with the weariness of someone who'd investigated too many neighbor disputes. Complaint alleges multiple vehicles at all hours, environmental violations, possible tax evasion. The accusation was so ridiculous I almost laughed. Instead, I invited him to inspect everything, offered complete documentation, even gave him Marshal Henderson's direct number. The inspection took an hour. Every safety protocol verified, every permit confirmed, every environmental standard exceeded by a country mile. Honestly, Mr. Kellerman, Dave said, closing his tablet with obvious relief, this is one of the most properly installed private fuel systems I've ever seen. Whoever filed this complaint either seriously misunderstood what they were seeing, or they were lying through their teeth. I didn't say that, but his expression told the whole story. That's when Brenda made her grand entrance, timing worthy, a Broadway diva. She came clicking across the street in those ridiculous heels, waving a folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. The sharp staccato of designer shoes on asphalt announced her approach like a drum roll before disaster. "Inspector Morrison, I'm Brenda Ashworth, HOA President. I hope you're taking this serious violation of our community standards appropriately." Dave shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I've completed my inspection. There are no violations here. The installation is completely legal and properly permitted under agricultural exemptions." Brenda's confident smile cracked like cheap paint in summer heat. But the environmental concerns, the safety hazards, the obvious commercial sales operation, no evidence of commercial activity whatsoever. No environmental violations detected. Safety standards actually exceed current requirements. Dave's voice carried that patient tone civil servants develop for dealing with difficult citizens. In fact, filing false reports with city offices wastes municipal resources and carries penalties under Code 847.3. Fines up to $5,000 for repeat offenders. I mentally filed that legal nugget away. Apparently, making bogus complaints wasn't just annoying, it was expensive when you got caught. Brenda's face cycled through more colors than a sunset over a chemical plant. "There must be some mistake. I have extensive documentation of multiple violations." "Ma'am," Dave interrupted with diplomatic firmness, "I'd be happy to review any legitimate evidence, but what I've observed today doesn't remotely match the filed complaint." After he left, Brenda stood in my driveway for a full minute, apparently processing that her master plan had exploded in her face. The acrid smell of her frustration mixed with overpriced department store perfume created an almost visible cloud of defeat. "This isn't over, Marcus," she finally hissed, voice tight as piano wire. "There are other ways to handle problem residents who refuse to cooperate." That evening, while researching municipal complaint procedures, always smart to understand the rules when someone's weaponizing them against you, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake, a contractor 3 houses down, "Dude, check Nextdoor app. Someone's going nuclear on you." I rarely use social media, but Jake sent screenshots that made my blood pressure spike. Brenda had created an account called Concerned Willowbrook Resident and was conducting a full-scale character assassination. Posts about dangerous fuel storage, declining property values, and residents who ignore community safety. Most neighbors were defending me, sharing stories about emergency fuel during power outages, but several were buying Brenda's narrative, expressing worry about safety and home values. Then I noticed something that changed everything. 3 of the most vocal anti-Marcus accounts were created in the past week, with profile photos that screamed stock image. Someone was manufacturing neighborhood outrage with fake profiles. The mini twist hit like ice water in my veins. Brenda wasn't just targeting me anymore. She was trying to poison the entire community against me through digital manipulation and manufactured consensus. I screenshotted everything, documented the fake accounts, and started building a comprehensive file. If Brenda wanted digital warfare, she'd pick the wrong opponent. 20 years of military logistics teaches you to think several moves ahead and always have contingency plans. The metallic taste of anger mixed with cold anticipation. Brenda was getting desperate, making careless mistakes. And desperate people with secrets tend to reveal more than they ever intended. Time to go on offense. The next morning, I was enjoying my first cup of coffee. That perfect moment when the world's quiet, except for birds chirping and the distant rumble of early commuters. When an unmarked sedan crept into my driveway like a hearse at a funeral. 2 people climbed out. A woman in a wrinkled business suit and a guy who screamed wannabe private investigator louder than a carnival barker. They didn't knock, didn't introduce themselves, just started prowling around my property with cameras and measuring tools like they were conducting a crime scene investigation. I stepped onto my porch, coffee mug warming my hands against the morning chill. "Morning, folks. Something I can help you with." The woman glanced up from her tablet with all the warmth of a tax auditor. property assessment routine neighborhood evaluation for insurance compliance purposes. Interesting, I said, taking a deliberate sip of coffee. Considering my insurance company didn't mention scheduling any assessment, mind showing me some official identification? That's when things got spicy. Buzzcut stepped forward with the swagger of someone who'd watched too many cop shows. Sir, we have legitimate business conducting this evaluation. I strongly suggest you return inside your residence. 20 years of dealing with military wannabes had fine-tuned my ability to spot fake authority from 50 yards away. All bark, zero actual bite. I strongly suggest you remove yourselves from my private property before I contact actual law enforcement officials. They retreated, but not before Buzzcut snapped about 50 photos of my fuel pump from every conceivable angle. The whole encounter rire of amateur hour. People pretending to possess authority they'd never legitimately earned. 2 hours later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Usually ignore those, but instinct made me answer. Mr. Kellerman, this is Rick Santos from Apex Investigations. We need to discuss Brenda Ashworth immediately. My coffee suddenly tasted like pennies. I'm listening. She hired my firm to investigate you, specifically requested anything illegal, embarrassing, or compromising, offered a $5,000 bonus for information that could result in your arrest or forced relocation. The sheer audacity took my breath away. And you're sharing this information because when I conducted your standard background check, I discovered exactly who you are professionally. His voice carried genuine professional respect mixed with obvious embarrassment. Mr. Kellerman, this woman hired me to dig up dirt on a police chief. Did she honestly think I wouldn't discover that crucial detail? The mini twist hit like lightning splitting an oak tree. Brenda had been so obsessed with harassing some random blue-collar homeowner that she'd never bothered researching what I actually did for a living. She'd literally hired a private investigator to find criminal dirt on the guy who ran the local police department. She has no idea about my profession? I asked, though her cluelessness was becoming crystal clear. Absolutely none. When I informed her you were law enforcement, she accused me of fabricating excuses and demanded I continue digging. That's when I decided this conversation was necessary. I thanked Rick for his professional integrity and hung up, mind spinning like a turbocharged engine. Brenda had just crossed into territory she didn't even know existed. Hiring investigators to harass law enforcement officers wasn't just monumentally stupid. Depending on interpretation, it could constitute intimidation of a police official, which carries felony-level consequences in most jurisdictions. But the real nuclear bomb dropped that afternoon. I was underneath my truck, changing oil, when dispatch called with news that made me nearly crack my skull on the undercarriage. Chief, we've got a unique situation here. Someone filed a formal harassment complaint against you. Intimidation, stalking, abuse of authority. The metallic taste of disbelief mixed with motor oil residue in my mouth. Who filed this complaint? Brenda Ashworth, 425 Maple Street, claims you've been conducting surveillance, making threatening gestures, using your police position to intimidate her family members. I had to laugh despite myself. This woman had just filed a completely fabricated police report against the actual police chief for behavior that existed solely in her overactive imagination. The irony was thick enough to serve at Thanksgiving dinner, routed through standard investigative channels. I instructed dispatch assigned to Lieutenant Martinez. I'm recusing myself due to obvious personal involvement. You certain, Chief? This complaint is transparently bogus. That's precisely why we handle it by official protocol. Let proper investigation demonstrate it's bogus. Within 2 hours, Lieutenant Maria Martinez sat in my kitchen with digital recording equipment and official paperwork. Sharp, thorough, absolutely no-nonsense officer who'd earned her rank through excellent police work, rather than political connections. This is awkward as hell, Chief, she admitted. The rich aroma of fresh coffee, mixing with lingering motor oil scents from my work clothes, but I'm required to ask any validity to these stalking or intimidation allegations. Maria, I've spoken directly to this woman exactly twice in the past month, both occasions in public settings, both times with witnesses present, both conversations initiated by her, security footage available, every angle documented, motion sensors, timestamps, complete coverage. I showed her the relevant clips on my phone. Ironically, she's trespassed on my property more frequently than I've appeared on public streets near her residence. And Maria reviewed the evidence, shaking her head with professional disgust. Chief, I've investigated some spectacularly stupid false complaints, but filing fabricated charges against your own police chief, that requires Olympic-level stupidity. After Maria completed her investigation and left with a recommendation of unfounded complaint with evidence of harassment pattern, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, watching sunset paint Willowbrook's manicured lawns in golden light. Brenda had just committed the greatest strategic blunder of her entitled life. Time to stop playing defense. That weekend, I did what any reasonable person would do when dealing with escalating HOA harassment. I dove into public records. Call it professional curiosity. Call it due diligence. When someone's targeting you this aggressively, you need to understand what you're really dealing with. Willowbrook's HOA financial records are public information available online for any homeowner who bothers to look. Most people don't. Big mistake. I pulled up the last 8 months of expenses since Brenda took over, and what I found made my coffee taste like battery acid. The glow of my laptop screen felt harsh against my eyes as the numbers painted a picture uglier than I had imagined. Legal consultation fees, $15,000 paid to Ashworth and Associates Legal Services. Ashworth, as in Brenda's maiden name, as in her brother-in-law's law firm that handles her personal real estate litigation. Landscaping contract, $8,200 to Premier Grounds Management, owned by Brenda's nephew, Derek, a 22-year-old kid whose previous experience was mowing his mom's lawn twice a summer. Security consultation, $6,500 to Residential Safety Solutions run by Brenda's cousin, Mike, whose most recent job was hawking cell phone cases at the mall. Emergency roof repairs, $12,400 to Quality Construction Solutions. Brenda's other brother-in-law's outfit, despite the community center roof being installed just 3 years AG. The pattern was crystal clear, and it made my stomach turn. Every major HOA contract approved since Brenda's election had gone to her relatives, with prices inflated like balloons at a kid's birthday party. Total estimated theft, $47,000 in 8 months of systematic family enrichment. But here's what transformed this from sleazy to criminal. None of these family connections were disclosed to the board. Every vote was presented as competitive bidding with qualified contractors. Every approval came with Brenda's passionate speeches about fiscal responsibility and protecting homeowner investments. The bitter taste of anger filled my mouth as I realized what this really meant. During my military career, I'd seen this exact scam in government procurement. Officials steering contracts to family while hiding relationships. It earned people federal prison sentences under laws designed to protect public money. In civilian life, it's called conflict of interest concealment. And when you're handling other people's money in a fiduciary capacity, it becomes felony embezzlement. My hands trembled as I printed the evidence, thinking about who was really getting robbed here. Elderly Mrs. Orion, living on Social Security, dutifully paying HOA fees while Brenda's family got rich. Young military families stretching budgets to afford Willowbrook, unknowingly funding criminal conspiracy. Single mothers working 2 jobs, trusting their HOA president to spend their money responsibly. This wasn't about my fuel pump anymore. Brenda had been systematically stealing from the most vulnerable people in our community while harassing anyone who might threaten her operation. The legal framework was bulletproof. HOA board members have fiduciary duty identical to corporate executives managing shareholder money. Concealing conflicts while approving inflated family contracts constitutes embezzlement, Fr. Odd, and breach of fiduciary duty. In our state, that's a Class C felony, with potential federal wire fraud charges if payments cross state lines electronically. I couldn't investigate this myself due to personal involvement, but I could damn sure deliver it to people who could. The district attorney's office runs a white-collar crime unit that eats this kind of systematic fraud for breakfast. The beautiful irony was almost overwhelming. While Brenda had been filing false police reports and hiring investigators to harass me, I'd discovered she was running a family embezzlement scheme that could land her in federal prison for up to 20 years. Every threatening letter, every bogus violation, every attempt to force me out suddenly made perfect sense. Brenda wasn't just power-hungry, she was protecting a criminal enterprise. My fuel pump had never been the real issue. I was just the inconvenient neighbor who might look too closely at where the money was going. The sweet scent of justice filled my nostrils as I organized evidence into a prosecutable case file. Tomorrow morning I'd be making a very educational phone call to the DA's office. Brenda Ashworth was about to learn what happens when you pick fights with people who understand white-collar crime investigations. Monday morning, I called District Attorney Sarah Orion's office. Not as Police Chief Kellerman, as Marcus Kellerman, concerned citizen reporting potential financial crimes. The beauty of the American justice system is that evidence speaks louder than titles. And brother, did I have evidence? White-collar crime unit, Detective Reynolds speaking. I'd like to report suspected embezzlement involving an HOA board, multiple family members receiving inflated contracts, undisclosed conflicts of interest, estimated theft approaching $50,000 over 8 months. Can you come in this afternoon? Bring whatever documentation. Why? Have. The DA's office smelled like industrial-strength coffee and righteous determination. That particular mixture of caffeine and justice that keeps prosecutors functioning on 4 hours of sleep. Detective Jim Reynolds was exactly what you'd want investigating financial crimes. Razor-sharp eyes, CPA background, and the patience to follow money trails through corporate labyrinths that would make a manure dizzy. I spread my evidence across his conference table like a general planning D-Day. Bank records, contract approvals, family business registrations, board meeting minutes, where Brenda had cheerfully voted on her own relatives' proposals without mentioning tiny details like blood relationships. Holy shit, Reynolds muttered, scanning the documents with growing amazement. She's not even attempting to hide it. Look, 3 contracts approved in 1 meeting, all to family businesses, all at luxury pricing. Gets better, I said, pulling out my research on comparable services. That landscaping contract, I got quotes from actual professionals. Should have cost $4,000 maximum. Her nephew charged $8 and delivered work that looks like he used a weed whacker blindfolded. Reynolds leaned back, his leather chair creaking like an old ship. Mr. Kellerman, this is textbook embezzlement, fiduciary duty violations, conspiracy, potential federal wire fraud charges if electronic transfers cross state lines. Here's something I'd learned during 20 years of military logistics. Complex operations succeed through methodical coordination and strategic patience. Reynolds explained the prosecution timeline. Forensic accounting reviews, witness interviews, coordination with state HOA oversight boards. The key insight that every homeowner should understand. Rushing financial crime cases gives defense attorneys procedural holes to exploit, but building them systematically creates convictions that stick permanently. Timeline for solid charges, I asked 6 to 8 weeks minimum. We need cooperation from affected homeowners, documented proof that family relationships weren't disclosed, clear evidence of intent to defraud. He studied my background information carefully. You're not involved in HOA leadership yourself? I grinned, just a homeowner with a fuel pump that apparently threatens Western civilization. Perfect. Clean witness. No conflicts of interest. You'd testify? Absolutely. But building a criminal case was only half the strategy. That evening, I convened a war council at Mel's Diner, neutral territory where even Brenda's surveillance network couldn't reach. The rich aroma of bacon grease and brewing rebellion filled the air as 6 neighbors gathered around a corner booth. Marcus called this meeting, Dorothy Martinez announced, stirring sugar into coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead. Claims he has crucial information about our HOA finances. I prepared a civilian-friendly presentation. No legal jargon, just clear facts that ordinary folks could understand and get righteously angry about. Contract amounts, hidden family connections, the systematic pattern of steering community business to relatives while concealing relationships from voting board members. "So you're telling us," interrupted Bob Orion, a retired electrician whose wife had been harassed over garden gnomes, "this witch has been stealing our money to fund her family's business empire." "That's exactly what I'm saying. 47,000 documented so far. Probably more we haven't discovered yet." The table erupted like a volcano. Questions, outrage, demands for immediate vigilante justice. I let them vent their fury, then pulled out my strategic ace. "Here's our battle plan. The DA is building an airtight criminal case, but that takes time. Meanwhile, we organize a special HOA meeting demanding complete FINA, NCL audit, and vote of no confidence." "Are we legally allowed to do that?" asked Janet Williams, a young mother who'd been fined for her children's sidewalk chalk masterpieces. Dorothy whipped out a doe-eared copy of HOA bylaws like she was drawing a pistol. "Article 7, Section 3. Any 10 homeowners can petition for special meetings. Simple majority can remove board members for documented cause." I'd spent countless hours studying those bylaws, searching for procedural weapons we could deploy. Brenda might understand real estate law, but HOA governance procedures weren't her specialty. We had multiple legal avenues for her removal, if executed correctly. Timing is absolutely crucial. I emphasize special meeting gets scheduled immediately after criminal charges are filed. Maximum impact, guaranteed media coverage, overwhelming community pressure. "What about retaliation?" Bob asked nervously. "She's been pretty vicious to anyone who crosses her path." That question opened the door for my trump card revelation. Folks, I should probably mention something important. I'm Police Chief Marcus Kellerman. Brenda's been filing false reports and hiring investigators to harass me for months, completely unaware of who she was really targeting. The silence stretched like taffy before Dorothy burst into delighted laughter. "You mean this entitled princess has been trying to intimidate our police chief? Sweet Jesus, that woman is dumber than a box of broken hammers." The metallic taste of impending victory filled my mouth as we coordinated witness statements, organized documentation, and planned our community uprising. Each neighbor contributed stories of Brenda's harassment, evidence of discriminatory enforcement, proof that her community improvement crusade was really elaborate cover for systematic financial crimes. By closing time at Mel's Diner, we had assembled enough ammunition to end Bray, NDA's criminal empire permanently. While we were building our case, Brenda was apparently building her own version of Armageddon. Wednesday morning brought her most desperate gambit yet. An emergency HOA board meeting with exactly 24 hours notice designed to ram through her final solution before anyone could organize opposition. The agenda was a masterpiece of bureaucratic terrorism. Emergency safety resolution, immediate removal of hazardous fuel storage and imposition of community safety deposit. Translation, pay us $10,000 or we'll have your fuel pump destroyed by force. I arrived at the community center to find chaos. Brenda had stacked the deck with every ally, favor seeker, and scared neighbor she could intimidate into attendance. The smell of fear and cheap perfume hung in the air like fog over a swamp. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brenda announced with the authority of someone who'd clearly lost her mind, "we're facing an imminent safety crisis that requires immediate action." She'd brought props this time, a briefcase full of what she claimed were federal safety reports, proving my fuel pump violated 17 different regulations. expert testimony from her brother-in-law's environmental consultant, even a PowerPoint presentation with dramatic photos of industrial accidents that had nothing to do with properly installed residential fuel storage. According to these federal findings, she declared, waving around documents that looked official enough to fool people who'd never seen actual federal paperwork, Mr. Kellerman's installation poses immediate risk of explosion, environmental contamination, and potential terrorism concerns. The woman had actually played the terrorism card over a legal fuel pump in suburban Ohio. The audacity was breathtaking, even by Brenda's standards. Therefore, I motion that we impose an immediate $10,000 safety compliance depot. Sit with full fuel system removal required within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in legal action and forced removal at owner's expense. Bob Orion raised his hand tentatively. Brenda, didn't the fire marshal already approve this installation? Fire marshals aren't qualified to assess federal terrorism protocols? She snapped back with the confidence of someone making things up as she went along. This requires specialized expertise that local officials simply don't possess. That's when I realized the mini twist that changed everything. Brenda wasn't just trying to force me out anymore. She was trying to create a legal precedent for emergency assessments without board approval. $10,000 from me today, then safety deposits from anyone else who crossed her. She was essentially creating a slush fund for unlimited extortion. I stood up slowly, letting the squeaky chair announce my presence. Before this vote proceeds, I'd like to request copies of these federal reports for independent verification. Brenda's smile faltered like cheap paint peeling. The documents contain sensitive security information that can't be shared with unauthorized persons. Unauthorized persons. I'm a homeowner. This is my money you're voting to confiscate. The board has reviewed the materials thoroughly. That's sufficient for procedural requirements. Here's something every homeowner should know. When someone claims documents are too sensitive to share with people affected by their contents, those documents either don't exist or contain information that contradicts the claims being made. It's the oldest scam in bureaucratic history. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I'd like to call the Federal Environmental Protection Agency to verify these protocols. Should just take a minute. The color drained from Brenda's face like water from a broken sink. That's not necessary. The board has LR. ED verified. EPA emergency hotline. This is Agent Morrison, came the voice through my speakerphone. I'd called ahead and arranged this little demonstration with a friend from my federal law enforcement contacts. Agent Morrison, this is Marcus Kellerman in Willowbrook, Ohio. We're dealing with an HOA claiming federal terrorism protocols require immediate removal of illegally installed residential fuel pump. Could you verify if EPA has any such requirements? Sir, the EPA has no protocols requiring removal of properly permitted residential fuel storage. Terrorism assessments are handled by Homeland Security, and they don't regulate private fuel pumps unless they exceed commercial quantities. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been scared into supporting Brenda's motion suddenly realized they'd been fed premium-grade. Board members started demanding to see the federal reports that apparently didn't exist. Furthermore, Agent Morrison continued helpfully. Anyone claiming to possess federal terrorism documents without proper security clearance could be violating national security laws. Brenda looked like she was about to faint. The briefcase full of fake federal reports suddenly seemed very heavy in her hands. We need to postpone this vote pending further review, she stammered, gathering her props like a stage magician whose tricks had been exposed. Actually called out Dorothy Martinez from the back. I motion that we postpone all votes pending a complete financial audit of HOA expenditures, specifically the landscaping contracts, legal fees, and consulting payments, approved since January. The motion carried unanimously. Even Brenda's allies weren't stupid enough to oppose financial transparency when the alternative was being associated with fake federal documents. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I noticed Brenda huddled with her phone again, typing frantically. The metallic clicking of her nails sounded like a telegraph operator sending desperate messages to the Titanic. She'd just committed her biggest mistake yet, attempting to defraud the entire HOA using fabricated federal documents. That wasn't just embezzlement anymore. It was mail fraud, wire fraud, and potentially federal terrorism statute violations. The taste of complete victory was getting stronger by the hour. Thursday morning brought the sweet smell of desperation wafting across the street. I was enjoying coffee on my porch when I noticed unusual activity at Brenda's house. Boxes being loaded into her Range Rover, important-looking papers being shredded in industrial quantities, and what appeared to be a family meeting that looked more like a crisis intervention. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reynolds. "Charges filing Monday. Keep your head down until then. Fat chance." Brenda wasn't going quietly into that good night. By noon, she'd launched her nuclear option, a full-scale character assassination campaign that would have impressed Joseph Stalin. Flyers appeared on every doorstep claiming I was under federal investigation for terrorist activities. Social media posts alleged I was stockpiling dangerous chemicals for unknown purposes. Anonymous tips flooded City Hall, claiming everything from illegal weapons storage to operating a meth lab. The woman had completely lost her mind, but she was losing it strategically. Every false accusation was designed to make me look dangerous, while positioning her as the brave whistleblower protecting community safety. It might have worked against someone without law enforcement experience. Unfortunately for Brenda, I understood exactly how evidence chains work. I spent the afternoon documenting every lie, screenshotting every fake social media post, recording every phone threat that came through my office. The beautiful thing about desperate people is they create evidence faster than crime labs can process it. But her master stroke came Thursday evening. A surprise visit from Child Protective Services, claiming anonymous reports that I was exposing neighborhood children to hazardous materials. The caseworker was professional, apologetic, and clearly embarrassed by the obvious false report, but she had to follow protocol. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm required to inspect any property where chemical storage might endanger children. You understand this is just procedure?" "Absolutely. Would you like to see my permits, safety inspections, and insurance documentation first, or should we start with the physical inspection?" 20 minutes later, she closed her tablet with obvious relief. "Sir, this is one of the most professionally maintained fuel storage systems I've encountered. Whoever filed this report either seriously misunderstood what they were reporting, or they were lying to waste taxpayer resources and harass a citizen. I can't speculate about motives, but filing false CPS reports carries serious penalties under state law. Another legal nugget for my growing collection. False reports to Child Protective Services aren't just harassment, they're felony charges in most states, especially when filed maliciously to intimidate someone. Brenda was racking up criminal charges faster than a Vegas slot machine. But the real mini twist came Friday morning, when Detective Reynolds called with news that made my coffee taste like liquid gold. "Marcus, we've been monitoring financial activity as part of the investigation. Brenda made some interesting moves yesterday. Large cash withdrawals, attempted wire transfers to offshore accounts, liquidation of multiple business accounts. Sounds like someone's planning a vacation. Gets better. She tried to empty the HOA reserve fund, all $63,000. Bank flagged it as sus. Suspicious activity and froze the accounts pending investigation. I almost choked on my coffee. She tried to steal the entire reserve fund. Every penny claimed it was for emergency legal expenses related to community safety threats. Bank manager called it the most obvious theft attempt he'd seen in 20 years. The irony was delicious. While Brenda had been trying to destroy my reputation with false reports, she'd been caught red-handed attempting to steal every dollar the community had saved for actual emergencies. Pool repairs, road maintenance, storm damage cleanup, all the money homeowners had contributed for legitimate community needs, and she tried to grab it all on her way out of town. "There's more," Reynolds continued. "We traced some of those social media accounts spreading rumors about you. 3 of them were created from Brenda's home IP address using fake names, digital evidence of harassment, defamation, and cyberstalking." "How long before arrests?" "Monday morning, federal charges for wire fraud, state charges for embezzlement, harassment, filing false reports, and attempted theft. She's looking at 10 to 15 years if convicted on everything." I spent Friday afternoon watching Brenda's frantic activity from my porch. More boxes, more shredding, more desperate phone calls. Her husband looked like a man who just discovered his wife was the Zodiac killer. Her kids seemed confused about why mommy was crying and daddy was drinking whiskey at lunch. The sweet scent of honeysuckle mixed with the acrid smell of burning documents from their backyard. Whatever she was destroying, it was creating enough smoke to alert the fire department. The responding crew was led by Marshal Henderson, who gave me a knowing wink as they investigated the controlled burn that violated 3 city ordinances. Saturday brought silence. No activity at Brenda's house, no new social media attacks, no mysterious visitors or false reports. The calm before the storm that would destroy her world completely. Sunday evening, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching kids play in the street while parents chatted over fence lines. Normal neighborhood life resuming as the cancer of corruption prepared to be surgically removed. The taste of justice was getting sweeter by the hour. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning arrived with all the drama of a Hollywood blockbuster. I was sipping coffee and watching the sunrise paint Willowbrook streets in golden light when unmarked federal vehicles began rolling into the subdivision like a presidential motorcade. The timing was perfect. Brenda had called another emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. planning to ram through a final vote, expelling me from the HOA entirely. What she didn't know was that Detective Reynolds had coordinated the arrests to happen during the meeting, ensuring maximum witnesses and media coverage. I walked into the community center at 8:45 to find absolute chaos. Brenda had packed the room with every supporter she could muster, plus a few faces I didn't recognize. Probably more fake social media accounts turned into flesh and blood props. The air was thick with tension and Brenda's desperation perfume. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with the manic energy of someone who knew the walls were closing in. "Today, we finally resolved the safety crisis that's been threatening our community for months." She'd prepared her most elaborate presentation yet. Photos of my fuel pump with dramatic red circles and arrows, fake testimonials from concerned parents about children developing mysterious illnesses, even a petition demanding my immediate removal that looked suspiciously padded with signatures from people who didn't live in Willowbrook. "This individual," she declared, pointing at me with the drama of a prosecutor demanding the death penalty, has repeatedly refused to comply with reasonable safety requirements, filed frivolous complaints to waste city resources, and created a hostile environment for law-abiding families. I sat quietly in the back, checking my watch. 9:15, any minute now. Therefore, I motion that we expel Marcus Kellerman from Willowbrook Estates HOA for violation of community safety standards with immediate forfeit of all rights and privileges. That's when the cavalry arrived. The back doors opened and Detective Reynolds walked in, followed by 2 federal agents and a state prosecutor. The room went silent except for the sound of Brenda's confidence crashing like the Hindenburg. "Mrs. Brenda Ashworth." Detective Reynolds' voice cut through the silence like a sword through silk. Brenda's face went from flushed triumph to pale terror in about 3 seconds. "Yes, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent." The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, the scraping of chairs as people jumped up for better views. Someone was recording on their phone. I spotted a local TV news crew that had somehow gotten word of the arrest. But the real magic happened when Detective Reynolds turned to address the stunned crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, I'm Detective Jim Reynolds with the District Attorney's Office. Mrs. Ashworth has been charged with systematically embezzling HOA funds by steering contracts to family members while concealing conflicts of interest. Total theft exceeds $50,000 over 8 months. More gasps. Dorothy Martinez was shaking her head in disgust. Bob Orion looked like someone had told him his lottery ticket was fake. Additionally, Reynolds continued, she's been charged with filing multiple false police reports, hiring investigators to harass residents, and attempting to steal the entire HOA reserve fund last week. That's when I stood up for my mic drop moment. Brenda, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, you've been demanding I remove my fuel pump for months, filing false reports, hiring investigators, claiming I'm some kind of terrorist threat. I paused, letting the tension build like a symphonic crescendo. Too bad you never bothered to find out that I'm Police Chief Marcus Kellerman, and you've just been arrested for exactly the kind of crimes I've spent 20 years putting people in prison for. The silence lasted exactly 2 heartbeats before the room erupted like Mount Vesuvius. Neighbors demanding explanations, board members claiming they had no idea about the financial crimes. Someone actually started applauding. Brenda's face cycled through more emotions than a theater major's final exam. Shock, rage, disbelief, terror, and finally the cold realization that her world had just ended completely. You, she stammered, handcuffs clicking into place with the finality of a tomb closing. The police chief you've been filing false reports against for 3 months. Yeah, surprise. As federal agents led her away, the local TV crew caught every moment. The footage would be on evening news within hours. HOA president arrested for embezzlement had been harassing police chief. The remaining board members called for an immediate vote dissolving all of Brenda's motions and scheduling emergency elections. The vote was unanimous. Dorothy Martinez stood up with a grin that could power the Eastern Seaboard. I nominate Marcus Kellerman for emergency HOA president until proper elections can be held. I respectfully decline, I said, raising my coffee cup in salute. I've got a police department to run and a fuel pump to maintain, but I'll help however I can to clean up this mess. The taste of calm, complete victory, mixed with excellent community center coffee, as neighbors surrounded me with apologies, thanks, and requests for advice on emergency preparedness. Justice had been served with a side of poetic irony. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates had transformed from a community terrorized by petty tyranny into something that actually resembled the neighborhood we'd all hoped to live in when we moved here. Brenda Ashworth pleaded guilty to federal embezzlement charges and received 18 months in federal prison, plus 3 years probation and full restitution of the $67,000 she'd stolen. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and her family's business empire collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. The judge specifically noted that her pattern of harassment against a law enforcement officer demonstrated callous disregard for both the law and basic human decency. The money was returned to the HOA within 60 days, and we put it to work immediately. New playground equipment for the kids, road repairs that were actually needed instead of imaginary, a community emergency fund that helped 3 families during the tornado season. But the real transformation was cultural. The new HOA board, led by Dorothy Martinez, operated with radical concepts like transparency, accountability, and treating neighbors like human beings instead of potential violations. Meeting minutes were published online. Contracts were competitively bid. Board members who had conflicts of interest actually disclosed them instead of hiding behind fake documentation. My fuel pump became something of a neighborhood celebrity. During the ice storm in February, I helped keep generators running for 8 families, including the Martinez's home, where Harold's medical equipment literally kept him alive. The fire department now uses my setup as an example of proper residential fuel storage in their safety seminars. I established the Neighbors Helping Neighbors Emergency Preparedness Program using a portion of the recovered funds, free workshops on home security, emergency planning, and yes, legal fuel storage for anyone interested. We've helped 12 families install their own backup systems, all properly permitted and up to code. The program expanded beyond emergency prep, financial literacy classes for young families, HOA rights education for first-time homeowners, legal clinics where people learn about their actual rights, instead of accepting whatever authority figures tell them. Knowledge, it turns out, is the best defense against corruption. I even started a scholarship fund for children of veterans and elderly residents, the people Brenda had targeted most viciously. Last month, we sent Jake Martinez to community college to study automotive technology. Kid's got natural talent and deserves a shot at building something better than his family could afford before. The story gained national attention after the arrest footage went viral. HOA Karen picks wrong neighbor, he's the police chief, became an internet sensation with over 2 million views. I've received interview requests from news outlets, podcasts, even a true crime documentary series. Most I declined, but I did a few community policing seminars, sharing the lessons learned. The broader impact has been significant. State legislation now requires HOA board members to undergo basic training on fiduciary duty and conflict of interest disclosure. The Willowbrook provisions mandate independent auditing for HOAs managing over $50,000 annually. 3 other states have passed similar reforms. Federal task forces are investigating HOA corruption nationwide, using our case as a template for identifying the warning signs. Turns out Brenda wasn't unique, just uniquely stupid about who she chose to target. Personally, his whole experience taught me something about community policing that 20 years of badge work hadn't. Sometimes the most important law enforcement happens when you're not wearing a uniform, just standing up for what's right as a citizen and neighbor. I remarried last spring. Dorothy's granddaughter, Sarah, moved back to town after her divorce, and we discovered that fighting corruption together creates bonds stronger than traditional dating ever could. She's a paralegal who helps run our legal clinics and keeps me honest about proper procedural protocols. The kids love my workshop, and I'm teaching them emergency preparedness skills their urban father never knew existed. We're planning to expand the house, including a larger emergency preparedness center that can serve as a community resource during disasters. Properly permitted, of course, with full disclosure to all relevant authorities. Life in Willowbrook has become what suburban communities should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, transparent governance, and shared responsibility for collective well-being. The American dream, minus the nightmare of petty corruption. And my fuel pump still running perfectly, still legal, still helping people when they need it most. If you've got HOA horror stories, drop them in the comments below. I want to hear how communities are fighting back against corruption and abuse. And hey, smash that subscribe button for more justice porn stories like this one, because unfortunately, there are way too many Brendas out there who need to learn that actions have consequences. Sometimes karma needs a badge to get the job done.